Excuse me, sir, that boarding pass can't possibly be real.
The words sliced through the humid Miami air at Gate B47 like a blade, sharp and dismissive. Marcus Thompson looked up from his phone to find Jennifer Walsh, senior gate agent for Coastal Airlines, staring down at him with barely concealed disdain. Her uniform was crisp, her posture perfect, but her tone carried 15 years of unexamined assumptions. "I'm sorry," Marcus replied calmly, his voice steady despite the sudden attention from nearby passengers. Jennifer's eyes swept over Marcus's appearance, taking in his dark jeans, white polo shirt, and leather messenger bag. At 45, Marcus carried himself with quiet confidence, his graying temples and steady gaze reflecting someone who'd navigated countless boardrooms. But Jennifer saw something else entirely. Business class passengers typically dress more. She paused, searching for words that wouldn't get her fired. Appropriately. A woman behind Marcus stopped scrolling her phone. A businessman nearby glanced up from his laptop. The gate area, packed with travelers heading to Chicago on the evening flight, began to feel the subtle shift that comes when ordinary moments turn into something else. Marcus handed over his boarding pass without breaking eye contact. "Please verify the ticket." Jennifer took it reluctantly, her fingers drumming against the counter as she scanned the barcode. The system beeped. "Valid ticket. Business class seat 3A. Paid in full." For a moment, her confidence wavered. Then she rallied. "The system shows an irregularity," she announced loudly enough for the growing audience to hear. "I'll need to verify this with a supervisor." "What kind of irregularity?" Marcus asked, his voice still calm but carrying a note that suggested he wasn't going to be dismissed easily. "That's confidential information," Jennifer replied, her tone growing more defensive. "Amanda, can you come here, please?" Amanda Foster, a 28-year-old junior gate agent with nervous energy and eager-to-please eyes, hurried over. She'd been watching the exchange with growing unease, recognizing the dangerous territory Jennifer was entering, but uncertain how to intervene. "Check this ticket," Jennifer instructed. "Something doesn't look right." Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from James Morrison, his attorney, urgent. "Need to discuss tomorrow's Senate hearing. Call me." He silenced the phone. Not yet. The gate area buzzed with the controlled chaos typical of Miami International at 6:45 p.m. Flight 318 to Chicago was preparing for departure, but the usual rhythm of boarding announcements and passenger shuffling had been disrupted by the growing tension at the check-in counter. Marcus Thompson stood with the practiced patience of someone who'd spent his career dealing with difficult situations. As CEO of Thompson Ventures, a major investment firm managing $8 billion in assets, he'd faced down corporate boards, government regulators, and hostile takeover attempts. But this moment felt different, more personal, more dangerous. He'd just finished 3 days of intensive meetings in Miami, finalizing a $200 million acquisition that would expand his firm's reach into renewable energy infrastructure. The congratulatory messages flooding his phone represented months of careful negotiation, due diligence, and strategic planning. Yet here he stood having his dignity questioned by someone who'd made a judgment based solely on his appearance. Jennifer Walsh examined the boarding pass with theatrical intensity, holding it up to the light as if searching for forgeries. Her 15 years with Coastal Airlines had given her confidence in her authority, but they'd also reinforced certain assumptions about who belonged in premium cabins and who didn't. "Amanda," Jennifer said, not bothering to lower her voice, "when you see irregularities like this." "What's the first thing you check?" Amanda Foster shifted uncomfortably. She'd been trained to verify suspicious tickets, but she'd also been trained to treat all passengers with respect. The two protocols were colliding in ways that made her stomach tight. "I would check the passenger manifest and verify payment," Amanda replied carefully. "Exactly. And when the payment source is questionable, we have protocols to protect the airline." Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What exactly are you implying about my payment source?" Jennifer looked at him directly for the first time since taking his ticket. "I'm not implying anything, sir. I'm following established procedures for suspicious bookings." The word suspicious hung in the air like smoke. Other passengers were definitely listening now. A Hispanic man in his late 20s pulled out his phone and opened Instagram Live. An elderly African-American woman in a wheelchair looked on with knowing eyes that had seen this script before. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Another message from James Morrison press briefing moved to 8 p.m. They want your input on airline industry regulations. Is there a problem here? A new voice entered the conversation. Robert Klein, a 52-year-old white businessman in an expensive suit, had been watching the exchange while pretending to read his Wall Street Journal. His tone suggested he was offering to help, but his eyes held something less charitable. Just a ticketing irregularity, Jennifer replied, suddenly more professional. Nothing that concerns other passengers. Robert Klein smiled thinly. Well, if the seat is going to be available, I'd be happy to take the upgrade. My company could use the expense deduction. The casual assumption that Marcus's seat would simply become available hit the gate area like a slap. Several passengers stopped what they were doing. The man with the phone turned his camera toward the conversation. Marcus spoke quietly, but his words carried across the gate area. My seat isn't available. It's been paid for and confirmed. Jennifer's cheeks flushed slightly. Sir, until I can verify the legitimacy of your booking, I can't guarantee seat assignment. Then verify it, Marcus replied. Right now, in front of everyone. The challenge was issued calmly but unmistakably. Jennifer realized she'd painted herself into a corner. Either the ticket was valid, making her look foolish and discriminatory, or it wasn't, which seemed increasingly unlikely given the passenger's confidence. I'll need to make some calls, she said, reaching for the gate phone. Please do, Marcus replied. I'll wait. But even as he said it, they both knew the waiting was just beginning. The departure board above gate B47 showed Flight 318 to Chicago on schedule. But the energy around the boarding area had shifted from routine travel stress to something more electric. Word was spreading through the crowd that something significant was happening at the gate counter. Carlos Rivera, 29, and social media savvy, had been streaming live on Instagram while waiting for his flight. What had started as casual travel content was rapidly becoming something much more compelling. His follower count was climbing as viewers shared the stream. Okay, so we've got a situation here, Carlos whispered into his phone, angling the camera to capture the scene without being obvious. A gate agent is basically questioning whether this black businessman belongs in business class. This is wild. The viewer count hit 150 and climbing. Jennifer Walsh had spent the last 10 minutes on the phone with various supervisors, none of whom were giving her the backup she'd expected. The ticket was valid. Payment was confirmed. There were no flags in the passenger's record. But backing down now would mean admitting she'd made assumptions she wasn't supposed to make. The system shows an overbooking situation, she announced, seizing on the airline's most common excuse. We have more business class passengers than seats available. Amanda Foster checked her screen. But I show 3 empty seats in business class, she said quietly. Jennifer shot her a look that could have frozen the Miami humidity. The system isn't updating properly. We need to make adjustments. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his Coastal Airlines app. The seat map showed his assigned seat 3A, along with several other empty business class seats. He turned the screen toward Jennifer. Your own app shows my seat assignment and multiple available seats. Jennifer barely glanced at the phone. Passengers can't access real-time booking information. Apparently I can. Marcus replied, the steel under his calm becoming more apparent. Patricia Williams, the elderly African-American woman in the wheelchair, had been listening to every word. At 72, she'd lived through enough to recognize the patterns of discrimination, even when they came wrapped in corporate policy speak. Excuse me, Patricia called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd raised 5 children and buried 2 husbands. I've been flying for 40 years and I've never seen a gate agent question a valid ticket this thoroughly. Jennifer turned toward her with forced professionalism. Ma'am, this doesn't concern other passengers. Oh, but it does, Patricia replied, wheeling her chair closer. Because if you can question his ticket based on how he looks, you can question anyone's. The truth of that statement rippled through the crowd. Several passengers exchanged glances. A few more phones appeared, cameras discreetly activated. Tyler Johnson, 19, and home from college, had been half watching while scrolling TikTok. But something about the dynamic caught his attention. He'd grown up in an era where recording injustice was both instinct and responsibility. "Yo," he whispered to his phone, starting his own live stream. "This is actually happening right now. Look at this." Robert Klein, growing impatient with the delay, decided to insert himself more forcefully into the situation. "Listen, if there's really an overbooking issue, just give me the seat and move him to economy." Problem solved. The casual way he said it, the assumption that Marcus's displacement was both inevitable and reasonable, sent a shock through the increasingly attentive crowd. Marcus looked at Robert Klein for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that people leaned forward to hear. Problem solved, for whom Jennifer sensed an opportunity to regain control. "Sir, we're trying to accommodate all passengers fairly. If you'd be willing to accept a later flight with a complimentary upgrade." "No," Marcus said simply. "I have a confirmed reservation for this flight. I'll be taking my assigned seat." "The situation is complicated," Jennifer replied, her voice rising slightly. "It's really not," Marcus said. "Either my ticket is valid or it isn't. Either I paid for business class or I didn't. Either you honor confirmed reservations or you don't." Amanda Foster looked at her computer screen again, then at Jennifer, then at the growing crowd of passengers. She was beginning to understand that she was witnessing something that would be remembered long after Flight 318 landed in Chicago. Tyler Johnson's TikTok stream had jumped to 300 viewers. Carlos Rivera's Instagram Live was approaching 500. And somewhere in the back of the crowd, a local news reporter who'd been catching a flight to cover a story in Chicago was beginning to think the real story might be happening right here at Gate B47. The situation at Gate B47 had reached the point where pretending it wasn't happening was no longer possible. Other passengers had abandoned any pretense of minding their own business. The gate area had divided into clear camps, those recording with their phones, those watching with obvious discomfort, and those trying to ignore the growing tension. Lisa Martinez, the lead flight attendant for Flight 318, emerged from the boarding tunnel where she'd been conducting pre-flight safety checks. At 34, she'd seen enough passenger conflicts to recognize when a situation was escalating beyond normal gate agent authority. "What's the status on boarding?" Lisa asked, approaching Jennifer with professional concern. "Ticketing irregularity," Jennifer replied quickly. "Just need to verify some information." Lisa glanced at Marcus, then at the crowd of passengers obviously listening to every word. Her training told her to support her colleagues. Her instincts told her something was wrong. Marcus's phone rang. "James Morrison calling." Marcus let it go to voicemail, but not before several people noticed the caller ID displaying James Morrison, Esquire. "Friend of yours, Robert Klein?" asked with mock curiosity. "My attorney Marcus," replied matter-of-factly. The word attorney sent a ripple through the crowd. Jennifer's confidence wavered visibly. Amanda Foster stepped closer to her computer screen, suddenly very interested in getting the details right. "Is there a legal issue with your ticket?" Jennifer asked, trying to regain the initiative. "There wasn't," Marcus replied, "but your refusal to honor a confirmed reservation is creating one." Lisa Martinez cleared her throat. "Maybe we should involve station management." Jennifer shot her a sharp look. "I can handle this." But it was becoming clear that this had grown beyond what any gate agent was trained to handle. Carlos Rivera's Instagram Live had broken 800 viewers, with comments flooding in from people who'd shared the stream. Tyler Johnson's TikTok was approaching 1,000 views, and the hashtag coastal discrimination was starting to appear in posts. "Excuse me," a new voice called from the crowd. Elena Vasquez, investigative reporter for Channel 7 News, had been heading to Chicago to cover a corruption trial. But her journalist instincts told her the bigger story might be unfolding right here. "I'm Elena Vasquez from Channel 7. Can you tell me what's happening here?" Jennifer's face went pale. The presence of news media transformed everything. What had been a passenger service issue was now a potential public relations disaster. This is a private matter between the airline and our passenger. Jennifer set her voice tight. On the contrary, Marcus replied, this appears to be a very public matter. Elena pulled out her own phone, discreetly activating the voice recorder. Sir, are you alleging discrimination? Marcus considered his words carefully. I'm alleging that my confirmed reservation is being questioned without cause, my payment is being called suspicious without evidence, and my seat is being offered to other passengers without justification. And you believe this treatment is based on... I believe people can draw their own conclusions. Patricia Williams wheeled closer to Elena. Honey, I've been sitting here watching this whole thing. That man has done nothing but present a valid ticket and ask to board his flight. Everything that's happened since then has been about what he looks like, not what his reservation says, Robert Klein scoffed. Everyone's so quick to play the race card these days. The comment hit the crowd like a match thrown into gasoline. Several passengers visibly recoiled. Carlos Rivera's live stream exploded with angry comments. Tyler Johnson zoomed in on Robert Klein's face. Marcus remained perfectly still for 10 seconds. The gate area held its breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet steel. Mr. Klein, in your experience, how often do white passengers have their business class tickets questioned as potentially fraudulent? Robert Klein opened his mouth, then closed it, apparently realizing he was about to dig himself deeper into a hole that was already plenty deep enough. David Rodriguez, airport security supervisor, had been monitoring the situation from a distance. At 41 and Hispanic, he'd seen enough gate conflicts to know when one was about to require official intervention. He approached the group with the careful neutrality of someone whose job was to de-escalate, not inflame. Is there a security issue here? David asked, addressing the group but looking primarily at Jennifer. No security issue, Marcus replied before Jennifer could answer. Just a confirmed passenger trying to board his confirmed flight. Ma'am? David looked to Jennifer. Jennifer realized she was running out of options and allies. We're just verifying some booking information. David glanced at his watch. Flight boards in 15 minutes. How long does verification typically take? It was a reasonable question that highlighted how unreasonable the delay had become. Jennifer had no good answer. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from James Morrison. Saw the news alert. On my way to airport, don't board anything until I get there. As Marcus read the message, he realized that his attempt to quietly travel home had become something much larger. The question was whether he was ready for what came next. The 15-minute boarding warning had come and gone. Flight 318's departure was now officially delayed, and the tension at Gate B47 had evolved from uncomfortable to explosive. Jennifer Walsh found herself trapped between her initial assumptions and the growing evidence that she'd made a terrible mistake. Ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer announced to the gate area, her voice carrying the false authority of someone trying to regain control. Due to a ticketing discrepancy, we'll need to delay boarding while we resolve passenger seating issues. The announcement drew groans from the crowd and angry glances toward Marcus, exactly as Jennifer intended. If she couldn't win on facts, she'd try to turn public pressure against him. What exactly is the discrepancy? Marcus asked, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Jennifer hesitated. She'd been dancing around the truth for 20 minutes, but direct questions required direct answers. The payment method for your reservation shows irregularities that require additional verification. What kind of irregularities I'm not at liberty to discuss. You're discussing them publicly by delaying the flight. Marcus interrupted, his calm cracking just enough to show the steel underneath. What specifically is irregular about my payment? The question hung in the air like smoke. Every passenger in the gate area was listening now. Carlos Rivera's Instagram Live had crossed 200 viewers. Tyler Johnson's TikTok was approaching 2,000 views, with comments pouring in faster than he could read them. Corporate policies prevent me from sharing detailed payment information. Jennifer replied, seizing on the only refuge she had left. Robert Klein stood up from his seat, adjusting his expensive tie with theatrical importance. Look, this is ridiculous. If his payment is questionable, just give me the seat and let's get this flight moving. The casual confidence with which he claimed Marcus's seat sent shockwaves through the crowd. Several passengers exchanged horrified looks. Patricia Williams shook her head with the sadness of someone who'd seen this script too many times. That's not how airline reservations work, Marcus said quietly. Well, maybe it should be, Robert replied. When people try to game the system, who exactly is gaming what system, Marcus asked. Robert Klein realized he'd said more than he'd intended. I mean, when there are questions about payment. There are no questions about payment, Marcus replied. There are assumptions about payment, and those assumptions seem to be based on something other than financial data. Elena Vasquez stepped forward with her phone recording openly now. Mr. Klein, Robert Klein. Mr. Klein, are you saying this passenger's seat should be given to you because his payment is questionable? I'm saying if someone's trying to scam their way into business class. Based on what evidence, Robert Klein looked around the gate area, suddenly aware that dozens of phones were pointed at him, and thousands of people were watching his words spread across social media in real time. Lisa Martinez had been watching the exchange with growing alarm. As lead flight attendant, her job was to support smooth operations, but this situation was headed toward disaster. Maybe we should involve station management, Lisa suggested, again more firmly this time. I can handle this, Jennifer snapped, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his credit card company on speaker. American Express Platinum Customer Service. Yes, I need you to confirm a recent charge for Coastal Airlines, approximately $847 charged 3 days ago. The representative's voice came through clearly. Yes, Mr. Thompson, I show that charge. Paid in full, no issues, no fraud alerts. The gate area fell silent except for the ambient airport noise. Jennifer's face went ashen. Amanda Foster stared at her computer screen as if searching for salvation in the passenger manifest. Would you like me to connect you with our fraud department to verify the transaction, the Amex representative asked. No, that won't be necessary, Marcus said, ending the call. He looked directly at Jennifer. Still think my payment is irregular? Carlos Rivera whispered into his live stream. Chat is going absolutely crazy right now. This man just proved his payment on speakerphone, and she still hasn't backed down. Tyler Johnson's TikTok had exploded past 5,000 viewers. The comment section was a waterfall of outrage, support, and disbelief. Coastal discrimination was beginning to trend locally. Patricia Williams raised her voice from her wheelchair. That young lady owes this man an apology, and his seat added another passenger. And an explanation said a third. Jennifer Walsh realized she was facing something she'd never encountered in 15 years, with the airline complete public accountability for her actions captured and broadcast in real time to thousands of people. Her next words would determine whether she salvaged her career or ended it. The gate area at B-47 had transformed into an impromptu courtroom with passengers serving as judge and jury. Jennifer Walsh stood behind the counter like a defendant awaiting verdict, while Marcus Thompson remained calm at the center of a growing storm of public opinion. David Rodriguez, the airport security supervisor, stepped closer to the group. His years of experience told him this situation was approaching the point where someone would file formal complaints, and he wanted to understand exactly what had happened before it reached that level. Ma'am? David said to Jennifer, the passenger has verified his payment method. What's the next step in your verification process? Jennifer looked at her computer screen as if it might offer an escape route. It didn't. I need to contact station management for irregularities of this nature. What irregularity? Patricia Williams called out. That man's ticket is paid for, confirmed, and verified. What exactly are you verifying? Tyler Johnson turned his phone toward Patricia. Ma'am, you've been watching this whole thing every minute of it, Patricia replied. And I've seen this before, honey. Same script, different day. What do you mean? Patricia's voice carried the weight of experience and the authority of someone with nothing left to lose. 40 years of flying, and I've watched people who look like me and that young man get questioned, delayed, and doubted, while people who look like him," she pointed toward Robert Klein, "get assumed honest until proven otherwise." The observation hit the crowd like a revelation. Several passengers nodded. Others looked uncomfortable with the truth of it. Carlos Rivera's Instagram Live had reached 1,800 viewers, and the comments were becoming increasingly supportive of Marcus. "Chat wants to know if anyone else has seen this kind of thing before," Carlos reported. A middle-aged Latina woman raised her hand. 2 months ago, Phoenix Airport. They questioned my daughter's student discount ticket for 20 minutes. Asked for her school ID transcripts, everything. Never seen them ask white students for anything but ID. Another passenger, an older white man, looked ashamed. "I've never had my ticket questioned, not once in 30 years of business travel." The impromptu testimonials were building a case that extended far beyond Marcus's individual experience. Elena Vasquez was recording everything, recognizing that she'd stumbled into a story with national implications. Lisa Martinez watched the coalition forming with growing concern. Her job was to get passengers safely and happily to their destination, but this situation was spiraling beyond anything her training had prepared her for. Jennifer Lisa said quietly, "Maybe we should just board the passenger and discuss any concerns internally." Jennifer shot her a look that could have melted steel. "Don't undermine me in front of passengers." The response was loud enough for several people to hear, and it revealed Jennifer's primary concern: not passenger service, not company policy, but personal authority. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from James Morrison, flight delayed on news. "Heading to airport. Don't let them remove you from gate area." Tyler Johnson's TikTok stream was now approaching 8,000 viewers, and the algorithm was pushing it to more feeds. Comments were flooding in from people sharing similar experiences, creating a digital record of widespread discrimination. "This is bigger than one flight," Tyler whispered to his stream. "This is about how people get treated every day." Robert Klein, realizing he'd become a villain in thousands of people's social media feeds, tried to rehabilitate his image. "Look, I never said anything about race." "You didn't have to," Patricia Williams interrupted. "Some things get said without words." Elena Vasquez stepped forward. "Mr. Klein, when you offered to take this passenger's seat, what made you assume it would become available?" Robert Klein looked around the gate area, suddenly aware that every word was being recorded and broadcast. I assumed if there was a problem with his ticket." "But there isn't a problem with his ticket," Elena pointed out. "So what made you think there was?" The question hung in the air without an answer, because the real answer couldn't be spoken aloud without admitting to assumptions that Robert Klein didn't want to acknowledge. Amanda Foster, who had been quietly watching the exchange, finally found her voice. "Jennifer, his ticket is completely valid. All the verification checks pass. Maybe we should just—" "Amanda handled the boarding announcements," Jennifer snapped. "I'll manage this situation." But it was becoming clear that the situation was managing itself. Social media had turned Gate B47 into a public forum with thousands of people watching in real time as patterns of discrimination played out in broad daylight. Marcus remained at the center of it all, calm and dignified, allowing the truth to speak for itself while preparing for whatever came next. Michael Brooks, Coastal Airlines station manager, had been alerted to the situation by multiple phone calls from corporate headquarters. At 45, he'd handled hundreds of passenger complaints, but the reports he was getting about Gate B47 suggested something beyond routine dissatisfaction. He arrived to find what looked like a social media convention. Phones were everywhere, pointed at Jennifer Walsh, who appeared to be melting down in slow motion while a well-dressed black man stood calmly at the center of the chaos. "What's the situation?" Michael asked Jennifer quietly. "Passenger with suspicious payment trying to claim business class seat," Jennifer replied, her voice tight with stress. Michael glanced at Marcus, then at the crowd of recording passengers, then at his phone, which showed 17 missed calls from corporate communications. Whatever was happening here was already spinning out of control. "Mr. Thompson. Marcus Thompson. Mr. Thompson. I'm Michael Brooks, station manager. I understand there's been some confusion about your reservation. No confusion on my end, Marcus replied. I have a confirmed reservation, verified payment, and a valid boarding pass. The confusion seems to be entirely on your staff's end. Michael pulled out his tablet and accessed the passenger manifest. Marcus Thompson, business class seat 3A. Payment confirmed, no fraud flags, frequent flyer status. Clean record. The facts were undeniable, but admitting that would mean acknowledging that his gate agent had engaged in discriminatory behavior while being recorded by what appeared to be half the internet. Mr. Thompson, in the interest of resolving this quickly, I'm authorized to offer you some compensation for the inconvenience. What kind of compensation? Full refund of your business class upgrade plus a $500 flight credit plus complimentary hotel accommodation if you're willing to take tomorrow's flight. The offer hung in the air like a bribe wrapped in customer service language. It was generous enough to make most passengers happy, but it was also an admission that Marcus deserved compensation without addressing why he needed it. Marcus looked at Michael Brooks for a long moment. Are you offering me money to give up my confirmed seat? I'm offering you compensation for any inconvenience caused by what Michael Brooks realized he'd walked into a trap. Admitting there had been inconvenience meant admitting there had been wrongdoing, but the growing crowd and multiplying cameras made denial impossible. Robert Klein seized on the offer. That's a generous deal. I'd take it. You're welcome to take tomorrow's flight yourself, Marcus replied without looking at him. Patricia Williams laughed a sound with no humor in it. They're trying to pay you to accept discrimination. I've seen this before, too. Carlos Rivera was providing live commentary to his Instagram followers. Okay, so now they're literally offering him money to give up his seat rather than just honor his reservation. This is wild. Tyler Johnson's TikTok had crossed 12,000 viewers, and the comments were uniformly outraged. People were sharing stories of their own experiences, creating a real-time database of airline discrimination. Elena Vasquez stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, is it standard policy to offer financial compensation to passengers whose reservations are being honored? We always try to accommodate passengers. That wasn't my question. Is it standard to offer $500 to passengers whose tickets are valid and confirmed? Michael Brooks looked around the gate area, counting phones and calculating the public relations nightmare unfolding in real time. Every word was being broadcast to thousands of people, and every misstep was being preserved forever. Mr. Thompson, what would it take to resolve this satisfactorily? Marcus's answer was simple and devastating. Honor my reservation. The situation is complicated. It's really not, Marcus interrupted. Either you honor confirmed reservations or you don't. Either you treat all passengers equally or you don't. Either your policies apply to everyone or they don't. Jennifer Walsh, who had been watching the exchange with a growing panic, tried to regain control. Mr. Brooks, I followed all appropriate protocols. Have you? Patricia Williams called out. Because I didn't see you verify payment for anyone else. I didn't see you question anyone else's ticket. I didn't see you offer anyone else's seat to other passengers. The accuracy of the observation was undeniable. In 90 minutes, at gate B47, Marcus was the only passenger whose legitimacy had been questioned despite dozens of others boarding with similar tickets. Lisa Martinez, who had been monitoring the boarding delay with growing alarm, approached Michael Brooks. Sir, we're now 45 minutes behind schedule. Corporate is asking for status updates. Tell them we're resolving a customer service issue. What should I tell the passengers about boarding? Michael Brooks looked at the crowd of increasingly agitated travelers, many of whom were recording everything and clearly taking sides in the confrontation. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, we're working to resolve a ticketing issue and will begin boarding shortly. What ticketing issue? Someone called out. Why is only one passenger's ticket being questioned? Asked another. The questions came from multiple directions, creating a hostile environment that Michael Brooks was clearly unprepared to handle. Marcus remained calm at the center of the storm, but his patience was visibly wearing thin. His phone buzzed with another text from James Morrison en route. Whatever you do, don't accept any money. This is bigger than one flight. As Marcus read the message, he realized that his quiet evening flight home had become something that would be remembered long after Flight 318 reached Chicago. The situation at Gate B47 had reached the moment when both sides realized there was no graceful retreat. Michael Brooks stood with his tablet calculating damage control while watching his airline's reputation disintegrate in real time. Marcus Thompson remained unmoved, his calm presence highlighting every desperate attempt to make him disappear. Jennifer Walsh, recognizing that her career was likely over regardless, decided to double down. Mr. Brooks, this passenger has been uncooperative from the beginning. He's refused reasonable accommodation, declined compensation, and created a disruptive environment. The accusation sent a shock through the crowd. Several passengers audibly gasped. Carlos Rivera's live stream erupted with angry comments as viewers watched Jennifer attempt to rewrite history while being recorded. Disruptive, how Marcus asked, his voice deadly quiet. "You've refused to follow gate agent instructions. I've refused to give up my confirmed seat. Are those the same thing?" Patricia Williams had heard enough. "That young lady has been harassing this man for an hour while he's done nothing but stand there politely. If anyone's being disruptive, it isn't him." Tyler Johnson turned his phone toward Jennifer. "For everyone just joining this gate agent has questioned this man's payment, offered his seat to other passengers, and now she's calling him disruptive for not giving up his confirmed reservation." The TikTok had passed 18,000 viewers and was climbing rapidly. The algorithm had identified it as engaging content and was pushing it to more feeds every minute. Robert Klein, apparently unaware that he'd become a symbol of entitled privilege to thousands of social media users, decided to offer more unwanted commentary. "You people always make everything about race when it's really about following rules." The phrase "you people" landed like a bomb. The gate area went silent except for the ambient airport noise. Every phone camera zoomed in on Robert Klein's face. Patricia Williams closed her eyes as if the phrase had physically hurt her. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Elena Vasquez stepped forward immediately. "Mr. Klein, can you clarify what you meant by 'you people'?" Robert Klein's face went red as he realized what he'd said. "I meant people who... I didn't mean anything specific." "You meant black people," Patricia Williams said flatly. "Just say what you meant." Carlos Rivera was providing real-time commentary to his followers. "Did he just say 'you people'? Did that actually just happen? Chat is losing their minds right now." David Rodriguez, the security supervisor, had been hoping the situation would resolve itself, but Robert Klein's comment had pushed things past the point of peaceful resolution. Sir David said to Robert Klein, "I think you should probably step back from this situation. I have every right to express my opinion." "You have the right to remain silent," Marcus said quietly. "I'd recommend exercising it." The exchange was being broadcast live to thousands of people, creating a permanent record of implicit bias becoming explicit discrimination in real time. Michael Brooks realized his airline was facing a public relations catastrophe that would require crisis management far beyond his authority. "Mr. Thompson, perhaps we should continue this discussion in a private office." "Why?" Marcus asked. "So you can make me an offer I can't refuse while the cameras aren't rolling, to resolve this professionally. There's nothing more professional than honoring confirmed reservations." Jennifer Walsh, desperate to salvage something from the wreckage of her career, made one last attempt at control. "Mr. Brooks, I recommend we call security to remove this disruptive passenger." The suggestion hung in the air like a threat. Removing a paying passenger who'd done nothing wrong except refuse to surrender his seat would transform the incident from discrimination into something much worse. David Rodriguez looked at Jennifer with disbelief. "Ma'am, on what grounds would I remove this passenger failure to comply with gate agent instructions? What instructions to give up his confirmed seat?" Jennifer's silence was answer enough. Marcus's phone buzzed. James Morrison calling. This time, Marcus answered, putting the call on speaker. "Marcus, I'm 10 minutes out. Whatever they're asking you to do, don't..." James Morrison, attorney Marcus said for the benefit of the crowd. "We're having a public discussion about airline passenger rights." Morrison's voice came through clearly. Are they honoring your confirmed reservation? They're offering compensation for me to give up my confirmed reservation. That's not the same thing. Don't take any offers until I get there. The presence of legal counsel transformed the dynamic completely. What had been a customer service issue was now potentially a federal discrimination case with hundreds of witnesses and thousands of video recordings. Michael Brooks looked around the gate area, counting phones and calculating lawsuits. He'd handled angry passengers before, but he'd never faced a civil rights attorney backed by viral social media documentation. Marcus ended the call and looked directly at Jennifer Walsh. You called me disruptive for standing up for my rights. You've questioned my payment without cause, offered my seat to other passengers, and suggested I be removed for refusing to surrender what I've paid for. His voice remained calm, but everyone in the gate area could hear the steel underneath. Now you have a choice. Honor my reservation or explain to my attorney these witnesses, and however many thousands of people are watching, why you can't. The ultimatum was delivered quietly, but its impact was unmistakable. Gate B47 had become ground zero for a confrontation that would be remembered long after Flight 318 finally departed for Chicago. James Morrison walked through Miami International Airport like a man on a mission. At 48, the civil rights attorney had built his reputation on high-profile discrimination cases, and the frantic phone calls from his client had triggered every instinct he'd developed over 20 years of practice. He reached Gate B47 to find what looked like a social media circus. Dozens of passengers had phones out, all pointed toward a confrontation between airline staff and a calm black man who could only be Marcus Thompson. The energy was electric, with the kind of tension that preceded viral moments in federal lawsuits. Marcus James called out as he approached, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to courtrooms and corporate boardrooms. Marcus turned toward his attorney with visible relief. James. Perfect timing. James Morrison was everything Marcus wasn't: tall, where Marcus was average height; dramatic, where Marcus was understated; confrontational, where Marcus was diplomatic. His arrival shifted the entire dynamic at Gate B47. "Who's in charge here?" James asked, his voice cutting through the ambient noise with the precision of a blade. Michael Brooks stepped forward reluctantly. "I'm the station manager, Michael Brooks, James Morrison, attorney for Mr. Thompson. I understand you're refusing to honor my client's confirmed reservation. We're not refusing anything. We're offering reasonable accommodation." "That wasn't my question," James interrupted, pulling out his phone and starting to record. "Are you honoring his confirmed reservation or not?" The direct question, posed by an attorney and recorded on video, left Michael Brooks without wiggle room. Either he honored the reservation or he admitted to violating federal passenger rights. The situation is complex. "It's binary," James replied. "Confirmed reservation, verified payment, valid ticket. Honor it or explain under oath why you can't." Jennifer Walsh, who had been hoping the manager would resolve the crisis, realized she was facing something far beyond her authority or experience. James Morrison represented the kind of legal firepower that could end careers and bankrupt airlines. Elena Vasquez stepped forward with her own recording equipment. "Mr. Morrison, are you alleging discrimination?" "I'm alleging that my client's civil rights are being violated in full view of hundreds of witnesses and thousands of social media viewers," James replied. "The discrimination speaks for itself. Carlos Rivera whispered to his Instagram Live audience, his lawyer just showed up and this whole thing is about to go nuclear. To 800 people watching now. Tyler Johnson's TikTok had exploded past 25,000 viewers, with the hashtag coastal discrimination trending nationally. Comments were pouring in from people sharing similar experiences and demanding accountability. James Morrison pulled out a business card and handed it to Michael Brooks. "James Morrison and Associates. We specialize in civil rights litigation, particularly discrimination in public accommodations." Michael Brooks read the card with growing alarm. Morrison and Associates was known throughout the airline industry as the firm that had won multi-million-dollar settlements against 3 major carriers in the past 5 years. Mr. Brooks, my client, was returning from meetings in Miami where he finalized a $200 million acquisition. He's CEO of Thompson Ventures, which manages $2.8 billion in assets. He's also scheduled to testify before the Senate Commerce Committee tomorrow about airline passenger rights. Each revelation hit the crowd like a revelation. The man they'd watched being harassed for over an hour wasn't just any passenger. He was exactly the kind of witness who could transform individual discrimination into federal legislation. Patricia Williams laughed with genuine amusement for the first time all evening. "Did you say Senate testimony about passenger rights?" "Oh, honey, they picked the wrong passenger to mess with." James Morrison wasn't finished. "My client is also a board member of 3 aviation industry suppliers, a major shareholder in airline equity funds, and a frequent speaker at transportation policy conferences." The credentials kept coming, each one making Jennifer Walsh look smaller and Michael Brooks look more desperate. Robert Klein, who had been trying to fade into the background since his "you people" comment, made the mistake of speaking up again. How were we supposed to know all that James Morrison turned toward him with the focused intensity of a predator spotting prey? You weren't supposed to know anything except that he had a valid ticket. That should have been enough. I was just saying... You were just saying that black passengers should prove they belong in business class, while white passengers get the benefit of the doubt. Did I understand that correctly? Robert Klein's face went ashen as he realized he was being recorded by a civil rights attorney who specialized in making examples of people exactly like him. David Rodriguez, the security supervisor, had seen enough confrontations to recognize when one was about to require federal intervention. "Mr. Morrison, is your client prepared to file a formal complaint?" "My client shouldn't have to file anything. He should be in his seat flying to Chicago instead of standing here proving his humanity to people who should know better." The moral weight of the statement hit the gate area like a physical force. Several passengers nodded in agreement. Others looked ashamed of their initial silence. Lisa Martinez, who had been watching the escalation with growing horror, finally found her voice. "Mr. Brooks, maybe we should just board all business-class passengers and sort this out later." "There's nothing to sort out," James Morrison replied. "Either airlines honor confirmed reservations or they don't. Either civil rights apply at airports or they don't. Either this is America or it isn't." The choice of words was deliberate and devastating. James Morrison had transformed a customer service dispute into a fundamental question of American values, with hundreds of witnesses and thousands of viewers watching how it would be resolved. Marcus remained calm at the center of the storm, but his phone was buzzing with messages from contacts who'd seen the social media coverage and realized the implications for airline industry regulation. Jennifer Walsh looked around the gate area at the phone's cameras and increasingly hostile crowd. She'd started the evening as a senior gate agent with 15 years of experience. She was ending it as the face of airline discrimination in front of a national audience. The next word spoken would determine whether this became a case study in conflict resolution or a landmark civil rights lawsuit that would be remembered for decades. The viral transformation of Gate B47 was happening in real time across multiple platforms, creating a perfect storm of social media amplification. What had started as isolated live streams was becoming a coordinated documentation of discrimination, with hashtags trending and news outlets beginning to pay attention. Carlos Rivera's Instagram Live had broken 500 viewers, and he was providing running commentary like a sports broadcaster. Okay, so for everyone just joining, we're at Miami International Airport, where this black businessman has been trying to board his flight for over an hour. They keep questioning his ticket even though he's proven payment multiple times. The comments were a waterfall of outrage support and shared experiences. People were tagging news outlets, civil rights organizations, and airline executives, creating a digital paper trail that would be impossible to ignore or delete. Tyler Johnson's TikTok had exploded past 35,000 viewers and was climbing rapidly. The algorithm had identified the content as highly engaging and was pushing it to users interested in social justice, travel, and current events. Part 6 of this insanity, Tyler whispered to his phone. They just offered this man $500 to give up his seat rather than honor his reservation. His lawyer is here now, and these people are about to get destroyed. But the social media explosion was happening across platforms simultaneously. Twitter users were live tweeting the incident with coastal discrimination. Facebook live streams were capturing different angles of the confrontation. Reddit threads were being created with real-time updates and legal analysis. Elena Vasquez was coordinating with her news station via text while continuing to record. The assignment desk had recognized the story's potential and was sending a camera crew to the airport. What had started as one reporter catching a flight was becoming breaking news coverage. Channel 7 News is going live with this in 10 minutes, Elena announced to the crowd, her voice carrying the weight of mainstream media attention. Jennifer Walsh's face went completely pale. Being embarrassed on social media was one thing, but having her actions dissected on the evening news was another level entirely. Patricia Williams, who had been watching the social media activity with interest, raised her voice. How many people are watching this now? Carlos Rivera checked his viewers. Almost 4,000 on my stream alone, and people are sharing it everywhere. Tyler Johnson looked at his phone. 42,000 on TikTok and climbing fast. People are posting screen recordings to Twitter and Instagram. The numbers were staggering, but they represented something more significant than viral content. They represented witnesses, thousands of people who would remember how airlines treated passengers who looked like Marcus Thompson. James Morrison pulled out his own phone and began recording a video statement. This is James Morrison, civil rights attorney, speaking from Miami International Airport, where my client Marcus Thompson, CEO of Thompson Ventures, has been denied boarding on his confirmed business class reservation. He panned the phone across the crowd of recording passengers. As you can see, this incident is being documented by dozens of witnesses and broadcast to thousands of viewers in real time. This is not an isolated incident. This is a pattern of discrimination that happens every day to passengers who don't have the resources or platform to fight back. The statement was being recorded by multiple streams, simultaneously ensuring it would reach maximum audience across all platforms. Michael Brooks was frantically texting with corporate communications, trying to get guidance on damage control. But corporate was watching the same social media feeds he was, and they were as panicked as he was. A new development added another layer to the crisis. Other passengers were beginning to share their own discrimination stories in the comments sections of the live streams. Last month, Phoenix to Denver, they questioned my military ID for 20 minutes, one user typed. They searched my bag 3 times while white passengers walked right through, posted another. I've been randomly selected for additional screening on my last 8 flights, wrote a third. The individual stories were building into a collective testimony of widespread discrimination, with Marcus's situation serving as the focal point for much larger patterns of bias in air travel. Robert Klein, apparently unaware that he'd become the villain in thousands of people's social media feeds, tried once more to defend his position. This whole thing is being blown out of proportion. The comment triggered an immediate response from the live stream audiences. Carlos Rivera read some of the comments aloud. User says that white dude needs to sit down. Another one says he keeps making it worse. Tyler Johnson's viewers were even less charitable. Chat is roasting this guy. Someone posted his LinkedIn profile. People are not happy. Elena Vasquez turned her camera toward Robert Klein. Sir, do you still believe this passenger seat should have been given to you? Robert Klein looked around at the dozens of phones pointed at him and the thousands of people watching his every word. I think there's been a misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding I never meant to imply. I was just trying to help resolve the situation. By taking this passenger's seat, Robert Klein realized he was trapped in a conversation that would follow him long after Flight 318 reached Chicago. Maybe I should have minded my own business. It was the closest thing to an admission they would get from him, but it was enough to satisfy some viewers who had been watching his entitled behavior for over an hour. Marcus remained calm throughout the social media chaos, but he was aware that his life was changing in real time. His phone was buzzing with messages from business contacts, journalists, and civil rights organizations who had seen the coverage and wanted to offer support. James Marcus said quietly to his attorney, This is bigger than one flight. It was always bigger than one flight, James replied. The question is whether we use this moment to change something or just get you home to Chicago. As if to emphasize the point, Elena Vasquez received a text from her assignment editor. CNN wants to go live with you in 5 minutes. This is going national. Gate B47 was no longer just an airport terminal. It had become the center of a national conversation about dignity discrimination and the power of witnesses to demand accountability. The executive offices of Coastal Airlines' Southeastern Regional Headquarters were in full crisis mode. Phone lines were ringing constantly as social media managers, legal counsel, and public relations executives tried to understand how a routine passenger dispute had become a national news story. Regional VP Catherine Myers had been pulled out of a dinner meeting with investors to handle what her staff was calling the Miami situation. She'd handled passenger complaints before, but nothing that had generated trending hashtags and federal attorney involvement. "Get me a direct line to Gate B47, she ordered her assistant. "I want to speak to this Mr. Thompson personally." Meanwhile, at the airport, Michael Brooks was receiving a constant stream of increasingly urgent calls from corporate. His phone rang again, showing Catherine Myers' direct line. "This is Myers. What's the current status?" Michael Brooks looked around the gate area at the crowd of recording passengers, the news reporter, the civil rights attorney, and the man at the center of it all who refused to be intimidated into giving up his rights. "The situation is complex. The passenger has valid documentation, but the gate agent had concerns about the payment irregularities. Were there actual irregularities? Not, technically, but the agent followed protocols for suspicious bookings." On what basis were the bookings suspicious? Michael Brooks paused. The real answer that Jennifer Walsh had made assumptions based on Marcus's appearance was not something he could say to corporate without admitting to discriminatory behavior. "The agent exercised discretion in passenger screening," he said carefully. "The agent created a federal discrimination incident that's trending nationally," Catherine Myers replied. "I'm watching the live streams. This passenger is a CEO who's scheduled to testify before Congress about airline regulations." Do you understand what this means? Michael Brooks did understand. It meant his career was likely over, his staff was facing termination, and his airline was about to become a case study in how not to handle passenger relations. "What are your instructions?" he asked. "Fix it. Now. Whatever it takes." But even as Catherine Myers gave the order, she knew it might be too late. The damage was being done in real time, preserved forever on social media, and amplified by news outlets that were beginning to pick up the story. Back at Gate B47, Jennifer Walsh was experiencing her own corporate communication. Her phone rang with a call from Coastal Airlines Employee Relations. "Miss Walsh, this is Patricia Chen from Employee Relations. We need to discuss your handling of the passenger situation at Gate B47. Jennifer stepped away from the crowd, but not far enough to avoid being overheard by passengers with cameras. "I followed all appropriate protocols," Jennifer said defensively. "By questioning valid payment, by offering confirmed seats to other passengers, by calling paying customers disruptive for asserting their rights." Each question hit like a hammer blow. Jennifer realized that corporate was already distancing themselves from her actions, preparing to make her the scapegoat for policies they'd tacitly encouraged through years of training that prioritized authority over service. "I was protecting the airline from fraud. You were exposing the airline to federal civil rights violations." Patricia Chen interrupted. "Report to the office immediately after your shift. You're suspended pending investigation." The word "suspended" was loud enough for several passengers to hear, including Carlos Rivera, who reported it to his live stream immediately. "She just got suspended," Carlos whispered to his 200 viewers. "Corporate is cutting her loose." Tyler Johnson's TikTok audience, now approaching 50,000 viewers, erupted, with comments celebrating the news. The hashtag Coastal Discrimination was trending nationally, with thousands of people sharing their own airline discrimination experiences. James Morrison was coordinating with civil rights organizations via phone while keeping one eye on the corporate scramble. His experience told him that airlines typically tried to resolve these situations quickly and quietly, but social media had made quietly impossible. Marcus James said, "I'm getting calls from the NAACP, the ACLU, and 3 congressional staffers. This has gone beyond individual discrimination." Marcus nodded. "What do you recommend we have leverage now?" Real leverage. The question is how we use it. Elena Vasquez approached with her camera crew who had just arrived from the news station. "Mr. Thompson, CNN wants to interview you live in 5 minutes. Are you prepared to discuss this nationally?" Marcus looked around Gate B47 at the crowd of supporters, the scrambling airline staff, the viral social media coverage, and the attorney who had transformed his individual struggle into a civil rights moment. "Let's do it," he said. But even as he prepared for the interview, Michael Brooks was receiving another call from corporate headquarters. "Brooks, this is CEO Richard Winters. I'm watching the situation unfold on national television. I want that passenger in his seat. I want this resolved immediately, and I want a full report on how we allowed a routine ticketing issue to become a federal incident. Sir, the legal implications. The legal implications get worse every minute this continues. End it. Now." Richard Winters hung up, leaving Michael Brooks to face the reality that his airline's reputation was being destroyed in real time by staff members who had confused company policy with personal prejudice. As CNN prepared to go live with the story, Marcus Thompson stood at the center of a moment that would be remembered as either a turning point in airline passenger rights or another example of discrimination that went viral but changed nothing. The next few minutes would determine which version of history would be written. CNN's live feed activated just as Elena Vasquez positioned herself next to Marcus Thompson. Behind them, Gate B47 hummed with the energy of a moment that everyone recognized as historically significant. This is Elena Vasquez reporting live from Miami International Airport, where a confirmed business class passenger has been denied boarding for over 2 hours. With me now is Marcus Thompson. "Mr. Thompson, can you describe what's happened here tonight?" Marcus looked directly into the camera, with the calm confidence of someone who had spent years in front of corporate boards and congressional committees. Elena arrived at this gate with a confirmed reservation, verified payment, and a valid boarding pass. For 2 hours, airline staff have questioned my legitimacy, offered my seat to other passengers, and suggested I accept compensation rather than the accommodation I've already paid for. And you believe this treatment was based on your race. I believe people can draw their own conclusions about why a black businessman with valid documentation would be treated differently than white passengers with identical bookings. The live interview was being broadcast nationally while simultaneously being captured by dozens of passenger phones and streamed across multiple social media platforms. Marcus Thompson's words were reaching millions of viewers in real time. James Morrison stepped into the camera frame. "I'm James Morrison, Mr. Thompson's attorney. What viewers need to understand is that Marcus isn't just any passenger. He's the CEO of Thompson Ventures, a major investment firm. He's scheduled to testify before the Senate Commerce Committee tomorrow about airline passenger rights. And he's a board member of 3 aviation industry suppliers." Each credential hit the airwaves like a bomb. Jennifer Walsh, watching from behind the counter, looked like she might faint. Michael Brooks stared at his phone, reading increasingly frantic messages from corporate executives who were watching the same broadcast. More importantly, James continued, "Thompson Ventures manages pension funds for over 400,000 airline industry employees, including many who work for coastal airlines." The revelation sent shockwaves through the crowd. Marcus Thompson wasn't just a passenger being discriminated against, he was someone with direct financial connections to the people who were discriminating against him. Elena Vasquez turned back to Marcus. "What has this experience taught you about airline passenger rights?" "It's taught me that dignity shouldn't depend on your job title or net worth. It's taught me that discrimination happens every day to people who don't have the resources to fight back. And it's taught me that change only comes when enough people refuse to accept injustice." Carlos Rivera was providing real-time commentary to his Instagram audience. "Did you hear that? This dude manages pension funds for airline workers. They're discriminating against someone who literally helps pay their retirement. Tyler Johnson's TikTok audience had exploded past 75,000 viewers. The comments were a mix of outraged support and demands for accountability that extended far beyond coastal airlines. But the power reveal sequence wasn't finished. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a call on speaker. Senator Rodriguez's office. This is Marcus Thompson. I need to speak with the senator about tomorrow's hearing on airline passenger rights. Yes, I'll hold. The mention of Senate testimony while on live television created another wave of panic among airline staff. What had started as a local customer service issue was now connected to federal legislation. Senator Rodriguez came on the line quickly. Marcus, I saw the CNN coverage. Are you all right? I'm fine, Senator. But I think tomorrow's hearing just became more relevant than we anticipated. Indeed, it has. We'll be discussing this incident specifically. Will you still be able to testify? Assuming I eventually get home to Chicago, yes. The phone call was being broadcast live on CNN while simultaneously being captured by social media streams, creating multiple documentation layers for what was rapidly becoming a federal case study. Robert Klein, who had been trying to disappear since his "You People" comment, found himself directly addressed by the CNN reporter. Sir, you offered to take this passenger's seat. What's your response to learning about his background? Robert Klein looked around at the cameras, the live broadcast, and the thousands of social media viewers watching his answer. I had no way of knowing. Would it matter if he was a janitor instead of a CEO? Elena asked. The question hung in the air without an answer, because they all knew the real answer would be incriminating. Patricia Williams raised her voice from her wheelchair. That's the point, honey. It shouldn't matter what job someone has. Right is right. Her words were captured by every camera and broadcast to every audience, crystallizing the moral center of the entire incident. Marcus ended his call with Senator Rodriguez and looked directly at Michael Brooks. I believe someone from your corporate office is trying to reach you. Michael's phone was indeed ringing. The caller ID showed CEO Richard Winters calling personally. Mr. Thompson. Michael said, his voice tight with stress, I think we can resolve this immediately. Really, how? By honoring your reservation and apologizing for any inconvenience. Marcus looked at the CNN camera, the social media streams, the crowd of witnesses, and his attorney. That's all I wanted 2 hours ago. The simplicity of the statement delivered live on national television highlighted how a routine customer service interaction had been transformed into a federal incident through discrimination, arrogance, and the power of public accountability. CEO Richard Winters' emergency call to Gate B47 arrived just as the CNN interview was concluding. Michael Brooks answered with the resignation of someone whose career was about to end very publicly. Brooks, I've been watching the coverage. This passenger is going to single-handedly reshape airline regulation if we don't fix this immediately. Sir, we've offered compensation. I don't want him compensated. I want him boarded. I want this resolved. And I want to know how a routine passenger interaction became a congressional hearing preview. But it was too late for quiet resolution. The story had taken on a life of its own across multiple media platforms, and Marcus Thompson had become the symbol of airline discrimination for millions of viewers. James Morrison was coordinating with civil rights organizations while documenting everything for potential federal litigation. His phone buzzed with a text from the NAACP legal department, Thompson case perfect for class action. Pattern evidence overwhelming. Elena Vasquez concluded her CNN segment, but local news crews from 3 other stations had arrived along with newspaper reporters and social media influencers who specialized in civil rights coverage. Mr. Thompson Elena said one final question. What do you want viewers to take from this experience? Marcus looked directly into the camera. I want them to know that this happens every day to people who don't have lawyers, don't have social media platforms, and don't have congressional hearings scheduled. This isn't about me. This is about the thousands of passengers who face discrimination every day and have no recourse. As the cameras rolled, Patricia Williams wheeled closer to the media area. "I've been flying for 40 years," she said, her voice carrying decades of experience and wisdom. "I've seen this treatment over and over. The only difference tonight is that people are watching." Her words provided the historical context that transformed Marcus's individual experience into a broader civil rights moment. Tyler Johnson had been streaming for over 3 hours, and his TikTok audience had grown to over 100,000 viewers. The hashtag "Dignity Shouldn't Be Upgraded" had joined coastal discrimination as trending topics. For everyone asking what happens next, Tyler announced to his audience, "This dude is literally testifying before Congress tomorrow about airline passenger rights. This whole thing is going to change everything." Carlos Rivera's Instagram Live had reached 600-800 viewers, many of whom were sharing the stream to their own followers. The viral amplification was creating a snowball effect that was reaching millions of people across multiple platforms. Jennifer Walsh stood behind the counter like a ghost, realizing that her 15-year career had ended the moment she decided Marcus Thompson didn't belong in business class. Her suspension was already trending on Twitter, with thousands of comments ranging from satisfaction to calls for criminal charges. Amanda Foster, the junior gate agent who had supported Jennifer's initial assumptions, approached Michael Brooks quietly. "Sir, I think I should apologize to Mr. Thompson." It was the first sign that anyone on the airline staff was prepared to acknowledge wrongdoing without being forced by corporate pressure. Marcus overheard the comment and approached Amanda directly. "What would you like to apologize for?" Amanda looked at the cameras, the crowd, and the man whose dignity she'd helped undermine. "For not speaking up when I knew this was wrong. For following someone else's prejudice instead of company policy. For making you prove you belonged when your ticket should have been enough." The apology was genuine and powerful, capturing exactly what accountability looked like when it came from conscience rather than corporate damage control. James Morrison stepped forward. "Ms. Foster, are you prepared to provide testimony about standard procedures for passenger verification?" "Yes, sir, I am." The willingness of airline staff to provide evidence against discriminatory practices added another layer to the federal case that was clearly building. David Rodriguez, the security supervisor, had been watching the entire incident with growing unease. As a Hispanic man in airport security, he understood the dynamics of profiling and discrimination better than most. "Mr. Thompson, David said, I want you to know that not everyone working here agrees with how you've been treated." Marcus nodded. "I appreciate that. But the question is what you're going to do about it. I'm filing a report with airport administration recommending policy changes for passenger rights protection." The commitment to structural change offered in front of cameras and thousands of witnesses represented the kind of immediate consequence that could transform individual discrimination into institutional reform. Robert Klein, who had become the unwitting symbol of privileged entitlement, made one last attempt at rehabilitation. "Mr. Thompson, I want to apologize for my comments. I was out of line." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Klein, I accept your apology, but apologies don't change structure. Action changes structure." The distinction between personal accountability and structural change captured the heart of what the incident represented. Not just one man's experience, but a window into patterns that affected millions of travelers. As the media coverage continued and corporate executives scrambled to contain the damage, Marcus Thompson remained calm at the center of the storm, preparing to board the flight he'd been trying to take for over 3 hours, while knowing that his journey home had become a civil rights moment that would be remembered for decades. The arrival of Catherine Myers, Coastal Airlines Regional VP, marked the moment when corporate leadership finally took direct control of the crisis. She stepped off the emergency flight from Atlanta to find Gate B47 surrounded by news crew, social media streamers, and a crowd of passengers who had turned a routine boarding area into an impromptu courtroom. "Where's Mr. Thompson?" Catherine asked Michael Brooks without preamble. Michael pointed toward the media cluster where Marcus was concluding another interview, this time with a reporter from the Washington Post, who had been alerted by the viral social media coverage. Catherine Myers had handled passenger complaints for 20 years, but she'd never faced a situation where the passenger was simultaneously a congressional witness, a major investor, and the center of a viral civil rights moment. Every word she spoke would be preserved forever and analyzed by lawyers, journalists, and federal regulators. She approached Marcus directly flanked by two corporate attorneys who had driven down from their Fort Lauderdale offices. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Catherine Myers, Regional Vice President for Coastal Airlines. I'm here to personally apologize and resolve this situation immediately." Marcus looked at her calmly. "What exactly are you apologizing for?" The question was simple but devastating. Any specific apology would be an admission of wrongdoing that could be used in federal litigation, but any general apology would be meaningless to the millions of people watching the resolution, for the inconvenience and frustration you've experienced tonight. "That doesn't answer my question," Marcus replied. "What specifically are you apologizing for?" James Morrison stepped forward. "My client was subjected to discriminatory treatment, had his payment questioned without cause, was offered financial incentives to surrender his confirmed reservation, and was threatened with removal for asserting his rights." Which of those actions is Coastal Airlines taking responsibility for? The corporate attorneys flanking Catherine Myers exchanged glances. They were being asked to admit to federal civil rights violations on live television while being recorded by dozens of witnesses. Tyler Johnson whispered to his TikTok audience, which had grown to over 150,000 viewers. "She can't answer that question without admitting to discrimination. This is incredible. Carlos Rivera provided his own commentary. Corporate showed up, but they're trapped. Anything they say is going to be evidence in a lawsuit." Elena Vasquez, still covering the story live for CNN, turned her camera toward the corporate response. "Miss Myers, is Coastal Airlines prepared to acknowledge discriminatory treatment of Mr. Thompson?" Catherine Myers looked around at the cameras, the streaming phones, and the crowd of witnesses. "We are prepared to acknowledge that our service tonight did not meet our standards." What standards were violated? Elena pressed. The questions were creating a legal minefield. Every admission could be used in federal court, but every denial was being contradicted by hours of recorded evidence. Patricia Williams raised her voice from her wheelchair. "Just say what everyone knows. You treated that man differently because he's black." The elderly woman's direct statement cut through corporate doublespeak like a blade. Several passengers applauded. Social media comments exploded with support for her honesty. Marcus looked directly at Catherine Myers. "I don't want apologies. I want action." "What kind of action?" "Immediate termination of staff who engaged in discriminatory behavior. Policy changes to prevent future incidents. Compensation for passengers who've experienced similar treatment. And commitment to federal oversight of passenger rights enforcement." The demands were specific, measurable, and designed to create lasting change rather than temporary resolution. Jennifer Walsh, who had been suspended but remained at the gate, stepped forward with the resignation of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Miss Myers, I take full responsibility for my actions tonight. I made assumptions based on appearance, and I was wrong. The admission delivered in front of cameras and streaming live to hundreds of thousands of viewers was exactly what corporate attorneys had been trying to avoid." Jennifer, one of the corporate lawyers, warned. "No," Jennifer replied. "I'm done hiding behind policy when I should be admitting to prejudice." Her confession was being broadcast live across multiple platforms, creating permanent documentation of discriminatory intent that would be referenced in courtrooms, congressional hearings, and civil rights training for years to come. Catherine Myers realized that damage control was no longer possible. The incident had evolved beyond corporate crisis management into a federal case study with hundreds of thousands of witnesses. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "what would constitute satisfactory resolution from your perspective?" Marcus looked at James Morrison, who nodded slightly. "Boarding my confirmed flight would be a start," Marcus replied, "but resolution requires commitment to change that goes beyond tonight." What specific changes? Zero-tolerance policies for discrimination. Mandatory bias training for all passenger-facing staff. Independent oversight of passenger complaints. and partnership with civil rights organizations to monitor compliance. Each demand was reasonable, specific, and designed to create accountability mechanisms that would prevent future discrimination. Tyler Johnson's audience was approaching 200,000 viewers as news of the corporate arrival spread across social media. The hashtags coastal discrimination and dignity shouldn't be upgraded were trending nationally, with thousands of people sharing their own experiences and demanding industry-wide change. Michael Brooks, recognizing that his career was over regardless, stepped forward to support Marcus's demands. Mr. Thompson is right. We need structural change, not just apologies. The support from airline management offered voluntarily in front of cameras represented the kind of institutional acknowledgement that could transform individual incidents into policy reform. As corporate attorneys frantically texted with headquarters and social media audiences continued to grow, Marcus Thompson prepared to finally board the flight he'd been trying to take for over 4 hours, knowing that his journey had become a civil rights moment that would reshape airline passenger rights for generations. The crowd at Gate B47 had grown beyond passengers waiting for Flight 318. Word had spread through Miami International Airport that something historically significant was happening, and travelers from other gates had come to witness what many recognized as a civil rights moment. Marcus Thompson stood in the center of the crowd, surrounded by cameras, phones, and hundreds of faces representing every background and ethnicity. The energy was electric, with the anticipation that comes before speeches that are remembered for decades. Elena Vasquez from CNN introduced the moment live. We're about to hear from Marcus Thompson, the CEO who was denied boarding for over 4 hours, despite having confirmed reservations. Mr. Thompson has indicated he wants to make a statement. Marcus looked out at the crowd, at the airline staff who had discriminated against him, at the passengers who had witnessed everything, and at the cameras that would carry his words around the world. 4 hours ago, I arrived at this gate with a simple goal to fly home to Chicago after 3 days of business meetings. I had a confirmed reservation, verified payment, and a valid boarding pass. That should have been enough. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of experience and the authority of someone who'd spent years addressing boards, committees, and audiences. But it wasn't enough, because someone looked at me and decided I didn't belong in business class. Someone made assumptions about my income, my character, and my legitimacy based on nothing but my appearance. Patricia Williams nodded from her wheelchair, her eyes reflecting decades of similar experiences. This isn't about me, Marcus continued. This is about the thousands of passengers who face discrimination every day and don't have the resources, the platform, or the legal representation to fight back. Tyler Johnson whispered to his TikTok audience of over 250,000 viewers. He's about to drop some serious truth. This is going to be historic. Carlos Rivera provided his own commentary to nearly 8,000 Instagram viewers. You can feel it. This whole speech is going to be quoted forever. Discrimination thrives in silence. Marcus said, his voice rising slightly. It survives when good people say nothing, when witnesses look away, and when victims accept treatment they know is wrong because fighting back seems impossible. The words hit the crowd like a challenge. Several passengers looked uncomfortable, recognizing their own initial silence in Marcus's description. But tonight you didn't stay silent. You recorded, you witnessed, you spoke up. You turned individual discrimination into collective accountability. The crowd began to applaud, but Marcus raised his hand for quiet. The real test isn't what happens here tonight. The real test is what happens tomorrow, next week, next year, when the cameras aren't rolling and the hashtags aren't trending. James Morrison watched with the satisfaction of someone who had seen his client transform a personal injustice into a platform for broader change. Civil rights aren't advanced by perfect people in perfect circumstances, Marcus continued. They're advanced by ordinary people who refuse to accept extraordinary injustice. Elena Vasquez was providing live commentary for CNN viewers. You're listening to what many are calling one of the most powerful civil rights speeches in years, delivered not from a podium or a courthouse, but from an airport gate. Tonight, we've proven that dignity can't be bought. Discrimination can't be hidden, and accountability can't be avoided when enough people refuse to look away. The applause was building, now spreading through the gate area and into the adjacent terminals where people had stopped to listen. But speeches don't change power structures. Marcus said, his voice cutting through the applause. Action changes power structure. Policy changes power structure. Accountability changes power structure. Robert Klein, who had become the symbol of privileged indifference, stood near the back of the crowd with his head down, understanding that his own behavior had become part of the lesson being taught. To the airline staff who discriminated against me, your actions tonight will be studied in civil rights courses referenced in congressional hearings and remembered as an example of how prejudice disguises itself as policy. Jennifer Walsh, despite her suspension, remained in the crowd, tears streaming down her face as she heard her career and reputation being defined by her worst moment. To the passengers who witnessed and recorded, you've proven that bystanders can become agents of change when they choose courage over comfort. The crowd was fully engaged now, understanding that they had become part of something larger than individual travel plans. And to the millions of people watching this unfold on social media and television, remember that change doesn't happen because powerful people decide to be fair. Change happens because ordinary people decide to be brave. The standing ovation began spontaneously and spread throughout the gate area. People were applauding, not just for Marcus, but for the courage he represented and the accountability he had demanded. Tonight ends with me boarding the flight I should have boarded 4 hours ago, but tomorrow begins with all of us deciding whether tonight was a viral moment or a turning point. As the applause continued, Marcus looked directly into the CNN camera for his final statement. Dignity shouldn't depend on your net worth, your job title, or your legal representation. It should be guaranteed by your humanity. That's the America we're fighting for. That's the standard we're demanding. And that's the change that starts tonight. The speech was being broadcast live across multiple networks while simultaneously being recorded and shared across every social media platform. In the hours and days that followed, excerpts would be quoted by civil rights leaders referenced in congressional hearings and studied in schools as an example of how individual courage could spark collective change. As the crowd continued to applaud, Marcus Thompson prepared to finally board Flight 318, knowing that his words would outlive the incident that inspired them, and that his journey home had become a journey towards justice for millions of travelers who deserved the same dignity he had demanded. The immediate aftermath of Marcus Thompson's speech at Gate B47 triggered a cascade of institutional changes that extended far beyond coastal airlines. Within hours of the viral coverage reaching national news networks, airline executives across the industry were convening emergency meetings to assess their own passenger rights policies. Catherine Myers, still standing in the gate area with corporate attorneys, received a call from CEO Richard Winters that would reshape company policy permanently. Catherine, I've been on a conference call with our board, federal regulators, and legal counsel for the past hour. We're implementing immediate changes that I want you to announce personally to Mr. Thompson and the media. She took notes while he outlined a comprehensive response that went far beyond damage control. Effective immediately, Coastal Airlines is implementing the Thompson Protocol named after tonight's incident. Zero tolerance for discrimination in passenger services. Mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees within 60 days. Independent civil rights monitoring of passenger complaints. And partnership with the NAACP and other organizations to ensure compliance. The corporate response was being announced in real time while cameras rolled and social media audiences watched. It represented exactly the kind of structural change that Marcus had demanded, rather than superficial apologies. James Morrison pulled out his phone to record Catherine Myers' announcement. These commitments will be documented and enforceable through federal oversight, he said. This isn't just public relations. This is legal accountability. Jennifer Walsh, despite her termination, approached Marcus directly. The crowd quieted as she prepared to speak. Mr. Thompson, I destroyed my own career tonight through my prejudice and assumptions. but maybe something good can come from my mistakes if they help prevent other people from experiencing what I put you through. Her willingness to accept responsibility publicly without corporate protection or legal representation provided the kind of genuine accountability that corporate statements couldn't match. Tyler Johnson had been streaming for over 5 hours, and his audience had grown to nearly 400,000 viewers. "This is unreal," he whispered to his phone. "We're watching an entire industry change policies in real time." Carlos Rivera's Instagram Live audience had reached 12,000 viewers, many of whom were airline employees watching their own industry being transformed by a single incident of documented discrimination. Elena Vasquez was coordinating with news directors from multiple networks as the story continued to evolve. This has become the civil rights story of the year, she told her assignment desk. Every airline is going to have to respond to the Thompson protocol, but the changes were already spreading beyond individual airlines. Airport authorities at Miami International announced they would implement passenger rights training for all customer service staff. The Transportation Security Administration issued statements about bias prevention and security procedures. And congressional staffers confirmed that Marcus's testimony tomorrow would now focus specifically on the evening's events. Patricia Williams, who had become an unofficial spokesperson for passengers who had experienced discrimination, was interviewed by multiple news outlets about the broader patterns the incident represented. "This young man's courage tonight opened a door that's been closed for too long," she told one reporter. "Now, it's up to all of us to walk through it." David Rodriguez, the airport security supervisor, announced his commitment to implementing bias reporting mechanisms that would allow passengers to file complaints directly with federal authorities rather than relying on airlines to police themselves. Amanda Foster, the junior gate agent who had supported Jennifer's initial discrimination, volunteered to participate in training programs that would help other employees recognize and resist discriminatory practices. Michael Brooks, despite his own termination, provided detailed testimony about management pressure that had encouraged discrimination through informal policies and unspoken expectations. The individual accountability was building into institutional reform in real time, with each person's acknowledgement of wrongdoing creating pressure for broader change. Robert Klein, who had offered to take Marcus's seat and made discriminatory comments throughout the evening, approached Marcus as boarding finally began. "Mr. Thompson, I owe you an apology that goes beyond tonight. I've spent years benefiting from power structure that discriminate against people like you while pretending I didn't notice." Marcus looked at him for a moment. "Mr. Klein, the question isn't what you've benefited from. The question is what you're going to do differently going forward. I want to contribute to the change, however I can." It was the kind of personal transformation that extended the evening's impact beyond policy changes to individual behavior modification. As Flight 318 finally began boarding legitimate business class passengers, Marcus Thompson was among the first to present his boarding pass, the same pass that had been questioned for over 4 hours, but was now being honored without hesitation. Lisa Martinez, the lead flight attendant who had initially supported discrimination, personally welcomed Marcus aboard. "Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that tonight changed how I think about my job and my responsibilities to all passengers." The flight crew had been replaced with staff who understood they were serving someone who had just reshaped airline passenger rights through courage and determination. As Marcus took his seat in 3A, the same seat he had been assigned when he arrived at Gate B47 6 hours earlier, he reflected on how a simple business trip had become a civil rights moment that would be studied and remembered for generations. But the real victory wasn't personal vindication. It was the structural changes that would protect future passengers who faced discrimination without the resources or platform to fight back. The Thompson Protocol was already being adopted by airlines across the country, proving that individual courage could indeed spark collective change when enough people refused to accept injustice as inevitable. By the time Flight 318 finally pushed back from Gate B47, the incident had transcended viral social media moment to become a cultural phenomenon with lasting implications for civil rights, corporate accountability, and the power of witnesses to demand justice. Tyler Johnson's TikTok had reached over 500,000 views and was still climbing rapidly. The hashtag "Dignity shouldn't be upgraded" had been shared millions of times across platforms, with people posting their own stories of discrimination and demanding accountability from service industries beyond just airlines. "This is wild," Tyler said to his camera as he boarded his own flight. "What started as me just recording something weird has become this massive civil rights moment. The whole airline industry is changing policies because people refuse to stay quiet." Carlos Rivera's Instagram Live had drawn over 15,000 concurrent viewers at its peak, and the recorded video was being shared thousands of times per hour. Civil rights organizations were using clips from his stream to illustrate how bystanders could become agents of change. For everyone asking what happens next, Carlos told his audience this man is testifying before Congress tomorrow about airline passenger rights. Tonight didn't just go viral, it's going to become federal law. But the viral impact was manifesting in ways beyond social media metrics. Other airlines were proactively announcing policy changes to avoid becoming the next coastal airlines. United, Delta American, and Southwest all issued statements within hours, outlining enhanced passenger rights protections and bias prevention training. Elena Vasquez was fielding calls from news outlets around the world. "The international media wants to cover this as an American civil rights story," she told her assignment desk. This is being seen globally as an example of how social media can force institutional accountability. The story was being covered not just as transportation news, but as a breakthrough moment in civil rights activism, corporate accountability, and the power of ordinary citizens to document and resist discrimination. James Morrison was coordinating with civil rights organizations that wanted to use the incident as a case study for federal legislation. "The NAACP is calling this the most significant airline discrimination case since the Civil Rights Act," he told Marcus during the flight. "Your testimony tomorrow is going to reference tonight specifically. But beyond the legal and political implications, the human stories emerging from the viral coverage were creating lasting impact." Patricia Williams received hundreds of messages from young people thanking her for speaking up and representing the experiences of older passengers who had faced discrimination for decades. Amanda Foster was contacted by airline employees from across the country who wanted guidance on how to resist discriminatory practices and support passengers facing bias. David Rodriguez became a symbol for security and law enforcement officers who wanted to use their positions to protect rather than intimidate passengers experiencing discrimination. Even Robert Klein, who had become the unintentional villain of the story, received messages from people who recognized their own privilege and bias in his behavior and wanted to learn how to become better allies. The viral moment was generating educational content policy changes and personal transformation at a scale that extended far beyond the original incident. Marcus's phone was buzzing constantly with interview requests, speaking invitations, and partnership proposals. Civil rights organizations wanted him to become a spokesperson. Airlines wanted him to consult on policy changes. Universities wanted him to speak about corporate responsibility and social justice. James Marcus said during the flight, "This has become bigger than I expected." "It was always going to be bigger than one flight," James replied. "The question now is how we use this platform to create lasting change rather than just temporary attention." The flight crew on 318 had been briefed about their passengers' significance, and they provided service that reflected the airline's commitment to dignity and respect for all travelers. It was a stark contrast to the treatment Marcus had received just hours earlier at the same airport. Captain Sarah Mitchell made a personal announcement over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's flight represents more than transportation. It represents the commitment to treat every passenger with the dignity they deserve. We're honored to serve all of you." The announcement was being live-streamed by passengers who recognized the historical significance of the moment, creating additional documentation of institutional change in real time. As Flight 318 approached Chicago, Marcus reflected on how a routine business trip had become a catalyst for transformation that would be measured not in viral metrics but in the experiences of future passengers who would travel with greater dignity because of the courage shown by witnesses at Gate B47. The real victory wasn't the boarding pass in his pocket or the viral videos on social media. It was the knowledge that the next black passenger, Hispanic passenger, or any passenger facing discrimination would have stronger protections and more accountability because enough people had refused to stay silent when it mattered most. Flight 318 touched down at Chicago O'Hare at 1:47 a.m., nearly 6 hours behind schedule, but Marcus Thompson felt no frustration about the delay. The journey had become something far more significant than transportation. It had become a testament to the power of dignity witnesses and accountability to create lasting change. As passengers deplaned, many approached Marcus to express their gratitude for his courage and their admiration for how he had handled the situation. The elderly woman from seat 7B paused beside him. "Young man, you reminded us all what standing up for what's right looks like. My granddaughter is going to hear about tonight." A businessman from first class shook Marcus's hand. "I've been flying for 20 years and never spoke up when I saw discrimination. That changes now." Even passengers who had initially stayed silent during the incident at Gate B47 were acknowledging their responsibility to be better witnesses and allies in the future. Lisa Martinez, the lead flight attendant who had initially supported discriminatory treatment, waited by the jet bridge as Marcus prepared to leave the aircraft. "Mr. Thompson, I want to thank you for your patience and dignity tonight. You changed how I think about my job and my responsibilities to passengers." "Miss, Martinez, the real change happens tomorrow, and every day after that," Marcus replied. Tonight was just the beginning. Marcus walked through O'Hare's quiet terminal past news crews who had come to document his arrival and supporters who had driven to the airport despite the late hour. His phone was still buzzing with interview requests and messages from civil rights leaders, but he declined all media interviews. "Tomorrow," he told reporters, "tonight I just want to go home to my family." James Morrison accompanied Marcus to the baggage claim area where they debriefed the legal implications of the evening's events. "The documentation is extraordinary," James said. "Hundreds of witnesses, hours of video from multiple angles, live television coverage, and admissions of discriminatory intent from airline staff. It's the most thoroughly documented civil rights incident in aviation history." "What's the timeline for formal action?" Marcus asked. "Federal complaints will be filed within 48 hours. Congressional hearing testimony is tomorrow afternoon, and the NAACP wants to partner on a class action lawsuit representing all passengers who've experienced similar discrimination." Marcus nodded, understanding that his personal experience had become the foundation for broader legal and social change. Outside O'Hare's terminal, Marcus's wife, Sarah, and their 12-year-old son, Michael, were waiting in the pickup area despite the late hour. Dad Michael ran to embrace him. "I saw you on the news. You were amazing." Sarah hugged Marcus tightly. "I'm proud of you for not backing down, but I'm also relieved you're safe." The family moment grounded Marcus after hours of public attention and media scrutiny. This was why he'd fought so hard, not for viral fame or political platform, but for the simple right to travel with dignity and return home to the people who mattered most. During the drive home through quiet Chicago streets, Michael asked thoughtful questions about the evening's events. "Dad, why did they treat you that way?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "Because some people make assumptions about others based on how they look rather than who they are. But you proved them wrong, right? I proved that their assumptions were wrong. But the real proof comes when they treat the next passenger better because of what happened tonight." Sarah listened to the conversation with the satisfaction of someone whose husband had stood up not just for himself, but for principles that would benefit their son's generation and beyond. At home, Marcus finally checked the full scope of the viral coverage. Tyler Johnson's TikTok had reached over 800,000 views. Carlos Rivera's Instagram video was approaching 50,000 shares. "Dignity shouldn't be upgraded" was trending globally, But beyond the social media metrics, major news outlets were covering the story as a civil rights breakthrough. Editorial boards were calling for federal airline oversight. Civil rights organizations were planning coordinated action based on the documented evidence. Marcus's phone rang with a call from Senator Rodriguez, who would be chairing tomorrow's hearing. Marcus, tonight, changed everything about tomorrow's testimony. We're not just discussing theoretical policy changes anymore. We're responding to documented discrimination with national attention. Senator, the focus should be on structural change that protects all passengers, not just tonight's incident. Agreed. But tonight provided the evidence and public support we need to pass meaningful legislation. As Marcus prepared for bed, he reflected on how a routine business trip had become a catalyst for transformation that would be measured in the experiences of future travelers who would face less discrimination because enough people had refused to accept injustice. The real victory wasn't the viral videos or news coverage. It was the knowledge that the next time someone faced discrimination at an airport gate, there would be stronger policies, better training, and greater accountability, because one evening in Miami had proven that dignity and justice were not negotiable. Tomorrow would bring congressional testimony, media interviews, and continued advocacy for airline passenger rights. But tonight, Marcus Thompson was simply grateful to be home with his family, knowing that his courage had opened doors that would benefit travelers for generations to come. Marcus Thompson walked through Miami International Airport with the quiet satisfaction of someone returning to a place where history had been made. He was heading to Gate B47, the same gate where his routine business trip had become a civil rights moment that reshaped airline passenger rights across the industry. 3 months had passed since the incident that became known as the B47 moment, and the transformation was visible throughout the terminal. New signage reading "Passenger Dignity First" was posted at every gate. Training centers for airline staff were prominently featured with windows allowing travelers to observe bias prevention education in action. Marcus was returning from Washington, D.C., where he had concluded a series of congressional hearings that resulted in the Airline Passenger Rights Act of 2024 federal legislation that created enforceable protections against discrimination and established independent oversight of airline passenger treatment. The law, directly inspired by his experience at Gate B47, required airlines to document and investigate all passenger complaints within 24 hours, provided federal penalties for discriminatory practices, and created passenger advocate positions at every major airport. Carlos Rivera, who had gained over 100,000 new followers from his live stream coverage of the original incident, was now partnering with Marcus's foundation to train airline employees in recognizing and preventing discrimination. His social media platform had evolved from entertainment to advocacy with regular coverage of passenger rights issues. Mr. Thompson Carlos approached with genuine excitement. "I'm here filming the 3-month follow-up. The changes are incredible." Tyler Johnson had used his viral TikTok success to launch a nonprofit organization focused on documenting and preventing discrimination in public accommodations. His original video of the B47 incident had reached over 2 million views and was being used in civil rights education programs nationwide. "The training center here is exactly what we needed," Tyler told his current audience of followers who had come to follow social justice issues. Real change, not just viral moments. Elena Vasquez, who had won a regional Emmy for her coverage of the incident, was now working on a documentary about how social media could drive civil rights progress. She was at Gate B47 filming interviews with passengers about their experiences under the new policies. "The difference is night and day," Patricia Williams told Elena's camera. At 72, Patricia had become an unofficial spokesperson for passengers who had experienced discrimination, and her advocacy had helped shape many of the new policies. People are treating travelers like human beings instead of potential problems. The gate area itself had been redesigned with passenger comfort and dignity in mind. The customer service counter featured clear signage about passenger rights, complaint procedures, and contact information for federal oversight authorities. Jennifer Walsh, The former gate agent whose discriminatory behavior had started the incident was now working as a trainer for the new bias prevention programs. Her termination from Coastal Airlines had been followed by extensive education about discrimination and its effects, and she had requested the opportunity to help prevent other employees from making her mistakes. "I destroyed my career through prejudice," Jennifer told training groups with painful honesty. "But if my story helps other people recognize and reject bias, then something positive comes from my failure." Michael Brooks, the former station manager, had taken a position with the Federal Transportation Security Administration, where he was developing passenger rights training for airport security personnel. Amanda Foster had been promoted to senior gate agent and was leading implementation of the Thompson Protocol at Miami International. Her willingness to speak honestly about discriminatory practices had made her an effective advocate for change within the airline industry. David Rodriguez, the airport security supervisor, had been appointed as the first passenger advocate for Miami International, a federal position created by the new legislation to ensure that discrimination complaints received proper investigation and resolution. Even Robert Klein, who had offered to take Marcus's seat and made discriminatory comments, had undergone his own transformation. He now volunteered with civil rights organizations and spoke to business groups about recognizing and confronting privilege and bias. "I was part of the problem," Robert told audiences with genuine remorse. Changing meant acknowledging how my assumptions and entitlement contributed to someone else's suffering. The corporate changes at Coastal Airlines had become a model for the industry. Catherine Myers had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer with specific responsibility for passenger rights and bias prevention. The Thompson Protocol had been adopted by airlines nationwide, creating uniform standards for treating all passengers with dignity. Flight operations had improved as well. The bias and assumption-based disruptions that had delayed flights and created conflicts were largely eliminated. Customer satisfaction scores had increased across the industry as passengers experienced more respectful and professional service. As Marcus prepared to board his flight back to Chicago, he was approached by Lisa Martinez, who was now Coastal Airlines Director of Passenger Experience Training. "Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that every new employee learns about the importance of dignity and respect through studying what happened here 3 months ago. Miss Martinez, the real success isn't what happened here. It's what doesn't happen at other gates because of what people learned here." The boarding process was smooth, professional, and respectful, exactly what air travel was supposed to be for all passengers. Marcus's ticket was scanned efficiently, his seat confirmed without question, and he was welcomed aboard with the courtesy that every paying customer deserved. Captain Sarah Mitchell, who had commanded Flight 318 on the night of the incident, was again piloting Marcus's flight. She made a brief announcement that reflected the industry's transformation. "Ladies and gentlemen at Coastal Airlines, we're committed to treating every passenger with the dignity and respect you deserve. Thank you for choosing to fly with us." The flight to Chicago was routine in exactly the way Marcus's previous trip should have been: professional service, respectful treatment, and efficient operations. But the routine nature of the experience represented something profound. Discrimination had been replaced by dignity as the standard operating procedure. Marcus spent the flight reviewing reports from the Thompson Foundation, the civil rights organization he had established with James Morrison to monitor airline passenger treatment and advocate for continued reform. The Foundation had received over 3,000 reports of improved passenger treatment in the 3 months since the B-47 incident, along with only 47 discrimination complaints, a dramatic reduction from historical patterns. The complaints that were filed received immediate investigation under the new federal oversight procedures, with resolution times averaging 18 hours instead of the weeks or months that had been typical before the legislative changes. James Morrison had transitioned from Marcus's personal attorney to Director of Legal Affairs for the Thompson Foundation, where he was coordinating with federal authorities to ensure that the new passenger rights laws were enforced consistently across all airlines and airports. "The legal framework is solid," James had told Marcus during their last meeting, "but the real protection comes from cultural change, people refusing to accept discrimination, and witnesses refusing to stay silent. Patricia Williams had become the Thompson Foundation's senior passenger advocate, traveling to airports nationwide to speak with travelers about their rights and experiences. Her age, wisdom, and moral authority made her an effective advocate for passengers who might otherwise feel powerless to challenge discriminatory treatment. Change doesn't happen because powerful people decide to be fair. Patricia regularly told audiences echoing Marcus's speech from Gate B47, "Change happens because ordinary people decide to be brave." The social media impact of the original incident had evolved beyond viral content to educational resources. Carlos Rivera's Instagram account regularly featured updates on passenger rights success stories of discrimination prevention and interviews with airline employees who had been trained in bias recognition. Tyler Johnson's TikTok platform had become a clearinghouse for civil rights documentation, with other users following his example of recording and sharing incidents of discrimination across various industries. Elena Vasquez's documentary titled "Witnesses: How Social Media Changed Civil Rights" was premiering at film festivals and being used in university courses about activism and accountability in the digital age. The academic and policy impacts were equally significant. Business schools were using the B47 incident as a case study in corporate crisis management and stakeholder responsibility. Law schools were analyzing the legal strategies that had transformed individual discrimination into industry-wide reform. Congressional testimony based on Marcus's experience had led to similar passenger rights legislation being proposed for other transportation sectors, including rail, bus, and ride-sharing services. Airport authorities across the country had implemented passenger advocate programs modeled on the Miami International example, creating dedicated positions for investigating and resolving discrimination complaints. But perhaps the most meaningful change was the simplest passengers were being treated with dignity as a matter of routine policy rather than exceptional courtesy. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his son Michael. "Now 13, and more politically aware, Dad saw your interview on CNN about the airline bill. Proud of you for not giving up." The message reminded Marcus that the real measure of the B47 incident wasn't policy changes or viral videos, but the example it set for future generations about the importance of standing up for principle even when it was difficult or uncomfortable. As Flight 318 prepared for landing in Chicago, Marcus reflected on how a routine business trip had become a catalyst for transformation that extended far beyond airline passenger rights to encompass fundamental questions of dignity, accountability, and justice in American society. 6 months after the B47 incident, Marcus Thompson returned to Miami International Airport one final time as part of a federal review of passenger rights implementation. The transformation was complete and remarkable, not just in policy and procedure, but in the fundamental culture of how passengers were treated. Walking through the terminal, Marcus observed interactions that would have been impossible before the Thompson Protocol. A young Hispanic woman's ticket was questioned by a gate agent, but the inquiry was professional, transparent, and resolved quickly with supervisory oversight. An elderly black man's seating assignment was changed due to aircraft configuration, but he was provided full explanation, compensation, and assistance, exactly the kind of respectful treatment that should have always been standard. At Gate B47, a permanent plaque had been installed, in recognition of the courage shown here on August 15, 2024, when ordinary passengers became witnesses to justice and demanded dignity for all travelers. The plaque wasn't about Marcus specifically, but about the collective action of everyone who had refused to stay silent when they witnessed discrimination. Carlos Rivera was documenting the anniversary for his social media followers, but his content had evolved from entertainment to education. 6 months ago, this gate was where we learned that witnesses can change history, he told his camera. Today, it's proof that change can last when enough people refuse to accept injustice. A young black business traveler approached Marcus while he waited for his flight. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Kevin Williams. I just wanted to thank you. I fly every week for work, and I've never once been questioned about my ticket or treated like I don't belong. That's because of what you did here." The gratitude was meaningful, but Marcus understood that the real victory wasn't his personal vindication. It was Kevin's ability to travel with dignity without having to fight for it. Tyler Johnson, now a freshman at Howard University studying civil rights law, had traveled to Miami for the anniversary. His TikTok documentation of the original incident was being studied in his constitutional law courses as an example of how social media could drive policy change. Professor says the B-47 video is going to be in textbooks, Tyler told Marcus. Not because it went viral, but because it showed how regular people can demand accountability. Elena Vasquez's documentary had won multiple awards and was being used in journalism schools to teach about the responsibility of media to document and investigate rather than simply report. Patricia Williams, despite her age and health challenges, had insisted on being present for the anniversary commemoration. At 73, she had become a national symbol of the courage required to speak truth to power. "I've lived through enough history to know that change is rare and precious," she told the small crowd gathered at Gate B-47. "What happened here matters because it proved that dignity isn't negotiable, and justice isn't optional." James Morrison was coordinating with federal authorities to document the success of the Thompson Protocol and develop recommendations for expanding passenger rights protections to other industries. Even Jennifer Walsh, despite her initial role as the antagonist in the incident, had become an effective advocate for change. Her training programs for airline employees were considered the most effective in the industry because of her authentic accountability for past discrimination. "I tell every training group that I destroyed my career through prejudice," Jennifer regularly shared. "But if my mistakes help prevent other people from experiencing what I put Mr. Thompson through, then something good comes from my failure." As Marcus prepared to board his final flight from Gate B-47, he was approached by a delegation of airline executives, federal regulators, and civil rights leaders who had come to recognize the anniversary of the incident. Mr. Thompson, said Catherine Myers, now Chief Operating Officer of Coastal Airlines, the Thompson Protocol has been adopted by every major airline in America. Discrimination complaints are down 73%. Customer satisfaction is at historic highs, and employee training has eliminated most bias-based incidents. "The real measure isn't statistics," Marcus replied. "It's whether the next passenger who faces discrimination has more protection and support than I did 6 months ago." They do, confirmed David Rodriguez, now regional passenger advocate for the Southeast. "And they know their rights because of what you taught us about courage and accountability." As Flight 318 pushed back from Gate B-47 for the last time with Marcus aboard, he reflected on how a simple business trip had become a civil rights moment that would be remembered for generations. But the lasting legacy wasn't the viral videos, the news coverage, or the federal legislation. It was the knowledge that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they refused to accept injustice and chose courage over comfort. The real victory was that future passengers would travel with greater dignity because enough witnesses had refused to stay silent when it mattered most. As the plane climbed toward Chicago, Marcus looked out the window at Miami International Airport, where Gate B-47 had become more than a boarding area. It had become a symbol of what America could be when its people chose justice over silence and dignity over discrimination. The transformation was complete, but the work continued. Because civil rights aren't advanced once and preserved forever, they must be defended and extended by each generation that inherits them. And the lesson of Gate B-47 would endure that sometimes the most important battles are fought not because you're looking for conflict, but because conflict finds you, and you choose to respond with dignity rather than surrender. Sometimes the most important battles aren't the ones you choose to fight. They're the ones that choose you. And when they do, the question isn't whether you're ready. It's whether you're willing to stand up not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after. If this story reminded you that respect and dignity should never be negotiable, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that like button to show that stories about justice and accountability matter to you. Second, subscribe to this channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss content that could change how you see the world. And third, share this video with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by the seat they're sitting in or the assumptions others make about them. Because sometimes standing up for what's right in small moments creates changes that matter for everyone who comes after. Your voice matters. Your witness matters. And together we can make sure that dignity and respect aren't privileges to be earned, but rights to be protected. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story, because the next person who needs courage to stand up for what's right might be watching your feed, and this video might be exactly what they need to see.